Recall the Rex Tillersons, John Boltons, General Mark Milley's of President-elect Trump's first administration were critical at times in the days after January 6th in particular. But now it's about Trump loyalists inside the transition. CBS News has been reporting how loyalty matters. And today, one of those loyalists got a promotion of sorts, a return. Trump announced that Peter Navarro will return to the White House next year as his senior counselor for trade and manufacturing. Navarro, who did serve in the first administration as a trade advisor, was in prison for several months this year for defying a subpoena from the House Select Committee investigating January 6th. Let's bring in our political panel. Tom LoBianco, he is the co-founder and national political reporter for 24 Site News, and Sabrina Rodriguez, national political reporter at The Washington Post. Great to have both of you here. Sabrina, let's begin with you. Navarro, not a surprise coming in, but what does it signal about this incoming administration?
I mean, it signals that we're going to be seeing a repeat of Trump's trade policies. You know, Peter Navarro is someone who has been with him since the beginning. He served as an advisor to Trump in his 2016 presidential campaign. He was with him through his entire first term. And they share a lot of the same views when it comes to trade policy. So it really points us to expect Donald Trump to try and deliver on his promises of tariffs. You know, this is someone who shares his protectionist views, who is down to, you know, launch tariff threats at countries around the world. And that really is what Trump has promised, and that is where Peter Navarro really stands on these issues. So it's someone who's in alignment with him on that trade front.
And Tom, it brings up the question, who's running economic policy in the next Trump administration? Is it the Treasury Secretary, the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, if he gets confirmed? Is it some economic advisor in the White House, or is it Peter Navarro, who always is vocal inside these internal deliberations? What does your reporting tell you?
I mean, very classic Trump world dynamic, you know, Lutnick versus Bessent. Navarro being of that Bannon, Don Jr. wing of things. You know, you think back to these classic governing studies out of Harvard, you know, how you set up an operation. And Trump's only ever been one operation. It's whoever's in his ear, whoever's got the cell phone, how many can Susie Wiles, as chief of staff, block and tackle. But you know, Sabrina noted there, it really is, there is some unity on key items here, and especially with trade, potentially tariffs. Tariffs could be a little weird, all right? And you got to see where the donors come down on that. I remember, you know, shortly after the election, I was talking with some of my Trump folks about this. You know, where are the mega donors on this thing? But it's actually fairly, as Trump world goes, it's actually fairly unified.
Let's turn now to that possibility of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis being brought into the mix. You do wonder, could Senate Democrats, how would they look at it? We saw Senator Blumenthal earlier on the show said he thinks the Hegseth nomination's dead. So if it actually does die at some point, Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, who's been unique to say the least in terms of his voice on Capitol Hill, he weighed in on this possibility today.
I consider voting yes for him if he's possible, but I think he has to finally admit that he wears lifts in the boots throughout his whole campaign. Was it 3 inches? Was it 4 inches? I think he really should just come clear on that, and I could consider that. But I would think that he's a better choice than our current choice.
As someone who grew up in Pennsylvania, we see classic Western Pennsylvania personality and humor from Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania there. Sabrina, though, when it comes down to the reality of the defense secretary position, do you believe that DeSantis could actually get a bit of a bipartisan coalition if he ever became the nominee?
I think the reality is to find anything these days that's going to get a bipartisan vote is going to be very tough. I think Fetterman remains a unique figure in the Senate at this point. But will it be easier to get those 53 Republican votes? Certainly. I mean, seeing the conversation that's happening on Capitol Hill today and this week around Pete Hegseth just shows the uphill battle that he has. And the fact that we are even having a conversation about Trump, you know, considering DeSantis and having serious conversations with him about this, I think tells us potentially the future of Hegseth's nomination, and the fact that, you know, DeSantis will be someone that is less polarizing amongst Republicans and will be someone that the Republican base would be happy to see in that position.
Let's watch some of what Florida Governor DeSantis has said about President-elect Trump in the past.
He said he was going to drain the swamp, and I appreciated that. He did not drain the swamp. It got worse. He also said that he was going to build a wall and have Mexico pay for it, which I supported, and that didn't happen.
Trump, his refusal to debate, to me, that's a slap in the face to the people of Iowa.
Donald Trump is a choice. He's focused on his issues and himself.
So, Tom, he said all that and more. Does it matter?
If this happens, it's a brilliant chess move because it takes somebody who remains something of an independent powerhouse in Republican politics, not nearly where he was a year ago, but takes him out of the governorship, his own autonomy, puts him underneath of Trump, allows them to have some say in the governorship of Florida down there. I'm laughing because 1 year ago, when we were in the middle of the primary, we were still in the kiss of death countdown with DeSantis and Trump. They were sending out the emails constantly. Kiss of death, day 45.
Oh, I remember.
And that's pretty tepid from DeSantis. The question I have, and I was talking with some folks earlier about this, would he have the same problem that Matt Gaetz would have on the Hill? He didn't have great relationships with lawmakers. I mean, you remember he would walk around with his AirPods in. This was a key problem for him in the primaries. It's why he saw one of his best friends, Brian Mast, actually decamped from him. That was really remarkable. So I don't know that he would be able to survive a confirmation hearing. And the other question, too, is would he take it? Would he want to do that?
And Sabrina, just in the final minute here, what's in your notebook? What are you watching elsewhere in Washington this week?
I mean, I think it's definitely comes down to these confirmations and really us paying attention to who are the folks that Trump is going to be tapping for these positions. As we head towards January 20th, I think it's a big question. What is he going to be trying to get done on day one? I think we have some indications just from the people that he's tapping for these positions, how much, trade and immigration will be a huge issue, but how those things are fleshed out. How is it that he's going to roll out some of his trade policy? How is it that he's going to carry out mass deportation? I think for us, just getting some indications between now and January 20th will be key because he made so many day one promises. So what will actually get done on day one?
Sabrina Rodriguez down in West Palm Beach, keeping an eye on the transition. Appreciate your reporting. And Tom LoBianco, always great to see you here on set. Thank you very much for stopping by.